The weight of ink. What if that wasn't just a metaphor? What if the words we write, the ideas we share, actually had a physical weight? Not just the mass of the ink on the page, but the meaning itself. Well, that's what we're diving into today, a story about a discovery that could honestly change how we see everything.
So this is the bombshell claim from a radical new scientific paper. Just let this sink in for a second. Meaningful language is not massless. It's saying that our words, our stories, have a real tangible presence in the world, a weight that goes way beyond the simple molecules of ink.
I mean, just imagine it. What if that heartfelt letter you wrote was literally heavier than your grocery list? What if the most profound ideas actually had physical mass you could measure? It sounds a little like science fiction, doesn't it? Well, a team of scientists is claiming they've done it. They've measured it, and today we're going to get into their incredible story and the evidence they've put forward.
So where does a journey like this even begin? Well, it wasn't in some meticulously planned experiment. Nope. It all started with an accident, a completely accidental discovery born from a moment of personal grief and a very, very sensitive machine.
This is the note that kicked the whole thing off. A simple, urgent reminder. But it was loaded with an unspoken weight, a weight that was about to become very, very real. Okay, so picture this. It's 2019, and a scientist named Dr. Eleanor Mote is calibrating this hypersensitive scale. Her mind is elsewhere, though, distracted by some heavy family news. She distractedly places that personal note on the scale, and that's when she sees it. A tiny but persistent reading that just shouldn't have been there. It was heavier than a blank piece of paper, sure, but the difference was way too big to be just the ink. Something else was registering on that scale. To even begin to understand this anomaly, Dr. Mote and her team had to develop a whole new framework, what they called a new physics of language. And to build that, they first needed to create some entirely new units of measurement. First up, they defined the seme. The easiest way to think of it is like the atom of meaning, the smallest possible unit of information that actually carries weight. It's the fundamental particle of significance. Next, you've got the graph, which is just what it sounds like, the physical weight of the ink or the mark itself. But here is the absolutely astonishing part. One seme, the unit of meaning, is almost 750 times heavier than one graph. The meaning of the mark is just vastly heavier than the mark itself. And this is where the theory gets truly mind-bending. They call it the lex. The idea is that words accumulate mass over time simply by being used. A word that's been spoken for centuries has literally gained the weight of its own history. It's almost like a riverbed, where every use deposits another tiny grain of sediment. And this just illustrates the whole idea perfectly. The word love, which has been around since about 900 AD, is measurably heavier than a modern technical term like algorithm, which only appeared in 1957. History itself, it turns out, has mass.
So that's the incredible theory. But did they have any evidence to back it up? Well, to test it, they started measuring the semantic mass of thousands of different documents. Everything from random strings of letters to the most profound things people have ever written.
The results were staggering. I mean, just look at this chart. On the far left, you see random characters, just gibberish, have almost no semantic mass. Makes sense. Literary prose in the middle carries some significant weight. But then look at the bar on the right. Threshold documents. These are things like final letters, prayers, suicide notes, and they were, by an enormous margin, the heaviest things they measured. What this really means is that when language is pushed to its absolute limit, when it's forced to carry the full, desperate weight of a human life, that weight becomes physically measurable. You know, in a way, the data is just proving what poets have always known.
But the consequences of this discovery, they might be even stranger than the discovery itself. For starters, it totally changes our understanding of something as simple as the act of reading.
According to the paper, reading is not a passive act. Their research found that when you read and actually understand a text, you physically add mass to it. Your comprehension is a literal, physical transaction. And they even measured it. A single silent reading adds, on average, about a quarter of a seme to a page's weight. So that means a book that has been loved and read by thousands of people is physically heavier than an identical brand new copy that's just been sitting on a shelf. But, this leads to a really fascinating puzzle. Think about a book like Hamlet. It exists in millions of copies all over the world. So if its meaning has a total mass, where does that mass actually live?
The paper's answer is what they call the simultaneity finding. The idea is that the total mass of Hamlet isn't located in any single book. Instead, it's distributed across every single copy in existence, almost like a shared consciousness.
And this has a pretty wild consequence. If all those other copies were to just vanish, the full semantic mass of the work would collapse into that final lone survivor. That one book would become an object of immense physical and cultural weight. This idea of concentrated weight led the researchers to look for the single heaviest item in their entire study. And the result is both scientifically fascinating and, well, it's also deeply moving. So what was it? The single heaviest object they measured was a letter that was never sent, written by someone to a person who was already dead. The writer themselves died the very next day. It was the perfect storm, a unique document loaded with finality and emotion, with no possibility of being shared. It carried the full, concentrated weight of a life's unexpressed meaning. You know, ultimately, this discovery doesn't just answer a question. It opens up a whole universe of new ones. It suggests our world is layered with this other dimension, a dimension of meaning and weight that we've never been able to perceive. Until now. And so we're left with the final haunting question that the paper itself poses. If meaning has mass, what is the weight of silence? The things left unsaid, the stories that were never written. Maybe that's the next frontier, learning to weigh not just the words, but the empty space between them.